session is our Rotary Grant Foundation certification training. And for that, we're going to transition it over to Brian might have a hand in this, but I believe primarily steering the ship is our new club grant subcommittee chair, and that is Bonnie Stiles from the Rotary Club of Springfield. Take it, Bonnie.
So, Ryan, does Brian need to get his show off here so I can bring mine up?
Oh, is Brian's show still up?
Yeah, take your show down, Brian.
There we go.
Okay, now I'll bring mine up, and here it comes.
There we go.
All right, we're ready. So I'm Bonnie Stiles. I'm the district grants chair for 2020 to 2023. And I am a member and past president of the Rotary Club of Springfield. So glad to have this opportunity to talk to you. And I want to thank Brian for that great presentation because it explains the district designated fund, so I don't have to. So wait a minute, why are we on this slide? Let's go back one. So this, I assume most of you are here because you want to get qualified for applying for district club grants, and that's primarily what I'm going to talk about. I want to point out that everything you need to apply for a district club grant is on the District 6460 website or will be there soon. So the application form for 2021-2022 is already available on the district website, and a copy of the report form, the new report form that will be for these 2021-2022 grants, has been submitted and will be uploaded soon. A copy of the memorandum of understanding and the form that you signed for that and the addendum is already on the district website, and a copy of the terms and conditions for Rotary Foundation, district and global grants is also out there. So all of this background information that you need to apply for the grant is already out there on the site. And if you have a member of your club that wasn't able to participate today, we will offer a video training on the district website. The one from last year is out there. This session is going to be recorded and it will be available. If it comes out well, it'll be available. If not, we will use last year's training session as a session that individuals can watch to become qualified to apply for global grants. And there's a quiz that's out there that Brian did for you to take if you do that online training on the district website. I updated the quiz slightly, so there'll be a new one and it'll be posted soon. So I think everything you need is out there. We have had a lot of participation with club grants. As Brian noted, 38 of 46 clubs in the district have taken advantage of these, and some have actually brought in considerable amounts of money over the years, as Brian pointed out. Last year, we actually funded 17 grants in the district for about $40,000. And we also provided $15,000 for scholarships from that district designated fund. So another excellent reason to donate to the annual fund is that this money actually comes back in 3 years and we can use it for these wonderful club grants and scholarships and global grants. So we'll move forward here. So as Brian pointed out, the grant funds come from the Rotary Foundation, and this kind of a training is actually required for certification to show you're qualified to apply for a grant. And looking over our audience, I think we have a very prestigious group of folks here who have, probably many of you have applied and are already certified, but I'm going to assume there's a few new folks out there that haven't done the grant training before. And the reason this grant training is required is because it's required by the Rotary Foundation. Because when you get a grant, you have accounting and stewardship responsibilities. So there's a reason for this. And I think the Rotary Foundation, in setting up this process, is trying to do the best it can to see that these funds meet community needs and that they're stewarded properly. So there's a reason for the training. I want Brian to interrupt me if I say anything wrong. Okay, types of grants. So this training is really going to focus on the club grants, and there's generally one grant per club per year, and it's usually for a local project, but these projects could also be small international projects. The deadline is August 15, and I've put the dates for this year's submissions up there so you can see them. And then the project needs to be completed by the time the report is due, which is May 15th in 2022. And these grants are administered at the district level. And then there's the global grants, and you heard John Gibbons give an update on some of the global grants earlier. He's with us here today, and I'm going to show you his contact information again a little later in the program. Those are less restricted in terms of when you can apply. You can apply at any time and on any day throughout the year. And those are actually administered at the Rotary International level. Brian talked about where these monies come from the district designated funds. So I don't think I'm going to go through that again, unless Brian thinks we need to throw that out there again. But basically you donate to the annual fund, and 3 years later, these monies come back. And in our case, they're used primarily for the club grants, the scholarships, and the global grants. So I think you just had a very thorough explanation of how those monies come in and how they're used. So I won't go through that again. See if there's anything else I need to say here. No, I think that does it. So these are some of the expectations as you prepare to submit an application for a district club grant. One, you have to have your club members involved, and it needs to be your project. A club grant is not a grant to another nonprofit that you select. A club grant is for a project that you do that meets community needs, and there are beneficiaries, but you're not just handing those beneficiaries a check. You are really expected to be involved in the project, and it needs to suit community needs. And for global grants, there are very strict assessments that need to be done to demonstrate community need, examination of the economic situation, the geographic setting, education levels, demographics, etc. But for the club grants, we don't really expect you to go out and do original research on community needs. Most clubs are going to have a fairly good grasp of the needs in the communities because of all the organizations and community involvement that its members have. And also, oftentimes communities have published needs assessments, so those needs are well known. And as a part of your planning phase, you're going to be working with whoever you want these beneficiaries to be, and you're going to be discussing thoroughly what they want and need. That's very important. It's not just what you think they need. We want it to be something that the community badly needs and wants, and you can help provide that need, solve that need. And you should have in your project real goals and outcomes. And I think anybody that deals with grants knows now it's a real expectation that you have measurable outcomes. You can actually tell us who's going to benefit, how many individuals are involved, those kinds of things. So there are outcomes that can be measured and documented as a part of your project. And another very important aspect that we'll talk about in a few slides here is sustainability. It's a very important consideration that the project and the benefits of the projects will continue after the tenure of the grant. So you're really launching something here that's going to have a longer life.
Hey, Bonnie, can I interject a couple?
Sure, yeah.
If I had to do this slide again, I would change the top line. I would say club members instead of club member, because we do have a lot of clubs where there may be just one individual in the club who's the local club grants guru, and they might be connected with a local organization that they really like, and they end up being a conduit for funds to that local organization for project after project after project, and that can get kind of old. So I think if we can get club members to do things like you see the slide, you've got several people in a club that are looking for projects that they can participate in. And from a timetable standpoint, really now you should have already had your club project picked out. And I know a lot of times we push this into the second quarter and, oh, we got this grant, we got to go get a grant, let's go find a project. You should start thinking about your projects that you want to fund earlier in the cycle, so that they're more likely to be meaningful and not just trying to find some money for your local community. Thank you. That's all I had to say.
Thanks for that, Brian. And then a little bit more on principles of sustainability, because this is such a big focus at Rotary International. Again, you want to have impacts after the funding. You want optimal use of resources, and often that means using the local resources so that they're accessible to the beneficiaries of the project once the grant is over. And it's also good for your community to be using local resources where possible. With the new focus on the environment, you want to be sure that your project is not actually doing harm. It's like the medical profession, first do no harm. So you don't want to do projects that are, killing lots of trees or killing endangered species. If you're doing a project, you want to be certain that you're not harming the environment. And you want to also work on strategies to have the maximum number of benefits. So not just the specific group you're working with, but how is that going to benefit others in the community and improve the situation in the broader community. So very important principles of sustainability.
It's okay to harm Kiwanians, but other than that, it's not.
No, it's not okay to harm them. I have to argue with Brian a little bit. So this is very important aspects of your projects. Let's see. Next thing, areas of focus. Brian did a really nice user-friendly slide on the areas of focus. So peace, again, disease, water and sanitation, maternal and child health, basic education and literacy, economic and community development, and environmental preservation and protection. And global grants have to satisfy one of these. It's technically not an absolute requirement for the club grants, but the district prioritizes it. So if you can tie in one of these, you're going to have a leg up in the review process because it's prioritized within the district that you address these one of these areas. And I think if you're creative, almost any project you do can be woven into one of these areas of focus. They're very, very broad. Stewardship of resources, stewardship of the monies, stewardship of the records. So this is a very important aspect, and the memorandum that you're going to sign off on shows that you are aware of these needs and that you're going to do these. So again, a club representative has to attend training and oversee the grant expenditures and accounting. And in the district, it's the president-elect, and the foundation chair is expected to participate in the training, and the foundation chairs if you're a club of over 25 members and you have a foundation. And I also think it's very beneficial as an individual who has actually pursued some of these club grants that the contact people that are actually going to be intimately involved with the project really should also participate in the training, or at least review the materials to know what the guidelines are. And it's also very important to have a succession plan for the grant records. When you turn in your report, you'll have to submit receipts for all the expenditures as a part of your report submission. And the district has to keep those for 5 years. The club has to keep the original receipts for 5 years. So when this project's done, who's maintaining those records? I mean, those issues should be worked out within your club so you can steward the records for your project. It's also important that you are using optimal use of resources, again, often local resources, and that you are working all throughout the project with the beneficiaries of the project to avoid waste. So, you know, you're checking up that the resources you provided are actually being used, and that they're being carefully cared for, and that they're gonna, you know, provide sustainable impacts after the end of the grant. And simple things like if you're buying expensive equipment, we would expect you to get bids to get the best price, those sorts of things. Rotarians are good at this. So it's reassuring that it's Rotarians that are overseeing these projects. One more stewardship slide. Global grants have to have a separate bank account, but club grants don't, but you have to have separate tracking of your club grant. So you got to set up an internal account that would track income and expenses. If you have an interest-bearing account, it's a rule that the interest must be spent on the project. And 2 Rotarians have to sign checks and deposits. So pretty basic responsibilities with accounting that most clubs can accommodate, but you need to realize that you really do have to save those receipts, and you have to submit copies with your report. So very important, and that you should have separate accounting for the grant. And I think if you have match in your grant, that should also be accounted for. Nope, I repeated some of this. So a ledger of income and expenses, you can do this on an Excel spreadsheet or any spreadsheet. You don't have to have expensive software to do this. Most clubs would have this already as a part of their treasurer's work in the club. So pretty simple things, but just track the monies that come in and the monies that go out. And we do expect some follow-up that if equipment is purchased, that you're going to check up with those beneficiaries later on and be sure that the equipment's being used and it's being maintained. So just good stewardship of finances and resources. Oh gosh, there's one more. It goes without saying that you have to obey all the laws in the home country and in the US, you know, for global grants, and in the US and home country for club grants too. We expect you to file your reports in a timely fashion. So there's a deadline for when your report has to come in, and we expect you to make it. If for some reason something happens like COVID-19 and you can't make it because you can't actually have the face-to-face interaction required for your project, you need to check with the foundation chair or a district governor to get a reprieve from doing your project when it's due and getting that report in on time. If you see any misuse or irregularities with the funding, you are expected to report that to the grants chair, to the foundation chair, district governor. So just good stewardship of the finances again, and the records. Now I got a global grant slide here, probably, even though this isn't on it, on Global Grants' training, we wanted you to be aware of the Global Grants program, and it's great that John Gibbons already gave an update on some of the exciting projects that are all going on, and you may indeed be interested in pursuing that. And we'll have John's contact information in the next slide. But in this case, a district or club is a partner, and then you have to have a host partner in the country where the project is going to take place. And these are larger grants. The minimum is $30,000. And oftentimes multiple clubs will go together to try to get the resources needed to do this. And then there's matching potential through the World Fund, right, Brian? You're muted.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah. So you don't have to come up with $30,000 to do a global grant. Typically, when you do a global grant, you have a partnering club in the other country that raises money. Your club raises money. The district designated fund here can match that money. Usually there's a district on the other side of the border that can match money there. And then the World Fund will match the club portion of the grant. Right now, the World Fund is hard pressed for money because of all the money they've spent in the last year because of COVID. So they're doing 80% matches of the club portion of the grants as of May 31st for next year. So, you know, you could probably, if you do the math on this, you could do a $30,000 club grant if you could squirrel together maybe $6,000, just something like that.
And as we noted before, these have to have a community assessment of need. They have to have focus on at least one of the areas of focus, and the application can be submitted anytime and online. And I would ask John Gibbon if he just wants to unmute and say anything here.
How about putting up the next slide if you
I
have
will
one?
do that. Here it comes. There you go.
All right. All of those requirements for a global grant, what I suggest, if a club is interested in doing a global grant, just contact me at the very beginning. And I'll review those with you, and I'll tell you whether we qualify for, your project qualifies for a global grant. And if not, maybe we could somehow structure it so that it will. And I think I just want to stress that, first of all of the paperwork and the details, I handle those along with whoever in your club is interested. But if your club just wants to participate in one of the district global grant projects that we have, there are 3 right now, and I mentioned those earlier. And if you want to know more about them, contact me, and I will get those to you. And I would just stress that there is no loss in any way if you designate some of the funds, no matter what they're being designated for, that you're sending up to the Rotary Foundation, which all of the clubs do that every year, almost. And that money, though, can also be used for a global grant. And so your club members can feel that they're part of doing good for the world.
Thank you. Now back to the club grants, because that's probably why most of you are here, but we would encourage you also to look at the opportunity of submitting a global grant. So all of the sustainability guidelines are applicable to global grants and club grants. So be sure you look at those guidelines. The club grants are usually between $2,000 and $3,000. The maximum award for 2021, we've already announced in the guidelines, will be $3,000 because we were more generous 3 years ago when we donated to the annual fund. So we have a little more money this year. So let's look at the timeline here.
You had a really awesome district governor 3 years ago that really pushed foundation giving too. I just wanted to.
Great. But a good reason to donate. Everyone should be donating. Here's the timeline. As Brian said, you should already be developing your grant project and thinking about what you want to do. You need to get qualified. That's what today is all about. If you're not already qualified, club presidents, president-elect, foundation chair, if you have more than 25 members and a foundation, you should attend the training. And again, there will be a training opportunity on the district website for those who couldn't participate today with a little quiz afterwards. August 15th is the deadline for applications. Notification, we should get back to you in September with whether or not you were approved for a grant. And then the monies will get to you either very late in September or very early in October. I think we made it by the end of September for this year's round. So May 15th deadline for reports, so that's coming up. So I would note if you had a 2020-2021 grant, so last Rotary year, your report, or that's actually the current Rotary year, your report is due May 15th. So please get those in. I would say we already have 6 reports in, stellar. And one club, the Washington Club, submitted their report in February. So the reports are due 60 days after you complete your project or May 15th at the absolute latest. But it is best if you get it in soon after completion so you remember all the details. For the club grants, again, you have to follow all the regulations that are provided in the MOU and addendum and the guidelines, Rotary International guidelines for grants, club and global grants. We expect it to be a new project, and we say club driven because it should come from your club. You're not just funding someone else's project. And we want it to be a new project so that you're creating new projects as you go. We don't really want to support something that your club does year after year after year. We want to see development of new projects to serve the community. The club can buy equipment or products for another organization. Again, you should try to avoid just handing the other organization a check. And there are cases where you'll do that, where perhaps the beneficiary has to buy very certain things from restricted vendors, and you just need to work with them on these purchases. And again, you have to have receipts for everything. So if you're working with the school district and they're ordering the supplies and it's exactly what they need, you can do that, but you have to be sure that you get the receipts from them for anything purchased with the grant monies. So as we've noted several times, you're not giving a grant to another organization. you're doing a project with another organization. And I think that's like a common mistake that people make, is to even say in their own materials that they gave a grant to this organization. You didn't. You did a project with them. So let's see. Now we're going to look here at the application itself. Very straightforward. Again, it's already available on the website. The first two questions are the easiest. It's the name of your club and how much money you want. And we assume everybody can come up with that. And then these are the next series of questions. You have to do an abstract of your project. That's a project summary, 40 words, that really tells us who, what, when, where, why, and how, and why it's important. Then you're going to describe the project, its location, its objectives. You're going to give an estimated start date. If you know when you're going to start, you can give us the precise date, but be sure it's after you've been awarded the grant, because you can't start before you have the grant. And if you spend any money before you have the grant, you can't use the grant monies to reimburse yourself. So pay attention to that. And the estimated date of completion, again, it's a good strategy to try to complete, in April. So you have a couple of weeks to get your report together and negotiate with us if there's anything that you need to add to your report, those sorts of things. So it's not a good idea to finish your project on May 15th, which is the day the final report is due. So just allow yourself some lead time there to prepare the report.
Hey, Bonnie.
Yeah.
Couple just comments on that. The summary of the project in 40 words, that's really helpful because we actually have to submit summaries of these projects to an individual at Rotary headquarters, and we provide them to her. Her name is Mary Hahn, very nice lady. We provide them to her on a grid. So if you can keep your project summary to a couple of sentences, it needs to be enough detail so that she can, there are certain things they just won't approve. And I can give you example. If it's just basically a project that promotes Rotary in your community, or if it's a project that really doesn't align very well with the community needs, they may reject that, but they need to have enough information where they can say yes or no. Fortunately, we don't have too many projects that say no. Last year we had one that was a no, but we were able to circle back with that club and get them to repurpose their grant for another thing that they were trying to do, and she said yes to that. So that's helpful. Plus, I like to have these summaries because I like to promote what we're doing with the grants within the district. Clubs all the time ask what kind of projects are out there, what kind of projects that communities have done, and I like to share it in a way that's concise. So that's and then the May 15th deadline, that is really, we have to get those reports done by the end of June in the district, and we realize there's going to be situations that come up from time to time where you can't get a project done by May 15th. It's very important that you let us know what's going on, because the last thing we want to do is have to return money that we were granted back to the organization at the end of the year. Now, we don't lose it. It gets diverted from our club grant to our DDF money. So we have it available in our DDF, but we'd rather spend it as we go. Thanks.
Yes, so be sure if there's some reason, and it should be a legitimate reason, that you can't make it by May 15th, and you know that a month out, let us know immediately so that we can.
The organization is being very, very flexible in the last couple of years because of COVID, obviously. And so they've extended some of our reporting deadlines. So we've got some flexibility this year, and more than likely next year, as COVID is probably going to linger. But let's try to keep. It used to be our deadline was May 1st. I extended that when I took over as the grants, the District Rotary Foundation chair. So this should give you enough time to get your project done. Thanks.
Thanks. This is a very important question. You're going to talk about how it benefits the community and improves the lives of the less fortunate. Again, be specific. You should have some outcomes. So give us very specific information about your plans to benefit the community. And again, be thinking about sustainability. You know, how is this going to benefit the community after the tenure of the grant? The project with Rotary is done, but how will this continue? In the application, you're supposed to provide us with the non-financial participation by Rotarians. Here it was clearly plural. So like Brian said earlier, we're not expecting this to be one Rotarian that's doing this project. We hope a number of members of your club are participating, and tell us what they did relative to planning, to actually doing the project, to managing finances, to assessing outcomes and evaluating the success of the project, and then what you're going to do as a follow-up. So if you purchased equipment, you're going to check with that club later and be sure that it's functioning and being used for the purposes that were intended in the project. You also want to describe your club's financial contribution. So in addition to the grant, is your club matching the grant? Let us know how much money will be contributed by your club. And then how important this grant funding is to the completion of the project. Very important. So it shouldn't be something that they could just do without you. You know, you're actually doing a joint project, and this grant is important to funding and completing that project. This is also very important. As a PR chair for a Rotary Club, I know this is important. So how will the public know this is a Rotary-sponsored project? So we want to know what you're planning to do to share the word about this great project. Are you going to do a media release and a press release? Are you planning to display the Rotary logo? So be specific. Remember that signs cannot come from the club. They have to come from the club portion, not the grant. So grants can't be used to produce a sign that says funded by the Rotary Club of Springfield or the Peoria North or wherever the project is. And this is where sometimes we have to do some repurposing with people in projects. There was one project like this where the grant was being asked for primarily for a large sign. That sign could come from the club portion of the contribution and use the grant monies, needed to propose to use the grant monies to do other aspects of the project. So that's another reason to get your proposal in ahead of time, so we have some time to work with you, because we want your application to be fundable. And also, if you're using the Rotary logo, be sure to identify the club and district and follow the Rotary branding guidelines. So and those can all be found on My Rotary, which Brian has talked about numerous times in his presentation. If you are involving cooperating organizations, you need to list them in your application, and you need to have a letter of participation from them saying they're committed to participate should the grant be funded and what they would do. So very important. And also the cooperating organization is a partner in the project, but is not the beneficiary. So it's someone that's not getting the grant money, but is helping you do the project. Often it might be a group that's going to provide expertise. Perhaps they're going to provide additional funding to implement the project. So just be cognizant that your beneficiary is not the cooperating organization. And again, we've said this numerous times, the project needs to be planned and implemented by the Rotary Club, not the cooperating organization and not the beneficiary. So very important that this be a club-driven project, and I think we've said that enough times to make that clear. The budget, we expect a complete, detailed, itemized budget for the whole project. So if you're purchasing equipment, we expect to have pro forma invoices that tell us what it is and how expensive it is. And we recognize that at the time of the grant, that might change slightly, the price might change slightly, but at least we have the estimate in the original budget. So list each item with the expected cost and provide the total cost for the entire project. Brian, are you wanting to add anything? I see you.
Well, one thing about that when I went through this the first time back in prehistoric era, I think I was a little confused about the expenditures. Now, one of the things that we don't have is unless you have a private foundation in your clubs, and some clubs have their own foundation, we don't have the sales tax exemption in the state of Illinois because we're not a 501c3. So there might be situations where it's cheaper or better, more efficient for the organization to buy the materials, things that they need for your project. And so it's okay to give them the money as long as they're spending the money directly on the things that the program, the project entails. It's probably cleaner if you went out to the hardware store and bought the rakes and shovels for the community garden project yourself, because that's cleaner from an audit standpoint. But it is okay if the organization does it. What we cannot allow you to do is have the organization buy the stuff and then reimburse them later. We also can't have you give the money just to the organization and let them buy their own things and not have receipts to justify that. You could imagine that you might end up in an organization that they might buy some really expensive rakes and shovels if you give them a blank check to go out and buy rakes and shovels. These are all the things that go along with our 4-star Charity Navigator rating, because we're really trying to be flexible, but we're also trying to be tight. So if we can avoid paying taxes, I love that idea, but let's just make sure that we don't just give people a blank check.
Yeah, absolutely. And if your club is providing match, I think that should also be indicated in the budget that you submit, so we can see that you're contributing beyond what's in the request for the grant. All right. Getting to the easy part now. So project contacts, these are 2 individuals who are listed who are going to really provide oversight and management of the project funds. And I think it is valuable for those individuals, even if they're not a president or a president-elect, which sometimes they're not, to take the training. And if they're not here today, you can direct them to the training that's available online on the district website. And just as Brian mentioned, there's a module on the Rotary International website too on grants management. So there's a couple places where they can get training beyond this, beyond what we're doing in this district, although our training is more geared to our district. So, okay. Then authorizations, the club president signs off, the foundation chair signs off on the application before submitting. So that comes in as a part of the application. So that's the club president, that's the president now. Okay. Now we're going to move to the final report and just run through this quickly, what you need to provide in the final report. And again, that is due 60 days after you complete your project. And again, you need to notify the District Rotary Foundation Chair, Brian. If there's a situation, you can notify me too, and I will talk with Brian if there's a situation that might cause a delay in completing your project before that deadline. And the district foundation chair and the district governor are the 2 in the guidelines that have the right to determine if your delay is acceptable. And as Brian already heard, he's a flexible and kind guy. So,
Yeah,
you know,
there's a good,
he'll work with you.
there's a good cop, bad cop thing here. I'm the good cop, and Ryan is definitely not the good cop. So you won't get this past Ryan. So
yeah, so the final deadline is for the next round of grants is May 15th, 2022. We've said this a million times. You have to attach copies of receipts. That's very important. And you have to keep original receipts in your club's files for 5 years. So just that's something that you need to be aware of, is save those receipts. Okay, so this is another one of those summaries that Brian likes. This is the first question on the report form. You're going to describe your project, and this is the who, what, when, where, and how did they benefit as possible in giving, you know, how many people benefited and those kinds of things. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit here. So the report form is on the district website, and there's the one out there now is for 2020, 2021. I've submitted the report form for 21, 22, and Dave Canarium is going to get that up soon. I don't think any of you need it because we haven't even awarded the grants yet, but it'll be up there when you need it, I promise. How many people benefited? Again, we're looking for numbers, so we really want a number. Don't say half the community or thousands of students, you know, give us a number. And we recognize that it might be an estimate, but give us your best estimate. Who were the beneficiaries? How were they impacted? And what needs were met? Again, give us the results of your project. How many people were served? How they were benefited, what's the long-term benefit to the community as a part of addressing sustainability, so those sorts of things. I think that's pretty self-evident, but be as specific as possible, because this is great material for the district to sing the praises of the projects and the district grant program. So it's great for PR, so we appreciate as specific information as you can give us. How many Rotarians participated? Again, plural, better not be one. You know, we want the club participating, and again, it should be a number. And then what did they do? And we're asking to give examples. You know, they participated in planning, they participated in the actual implementation of the project, they managed the grant finances, whatever. They agreed to go out and follow up after the project. So again, just tell us about activities related to the implementation of this grant. If there was a cooperating organization, again, you know, tell us what they did. And we have the clarification again that the cooperating organization is not the beneficiary. So you may have had another group that either provided monies or provided expertise, or perhaps even volunteered and helped you with the project. So again, just provide information on any cooperating organizations. This is very important so we can promote the wonderful things you've done, and we hope you have promoted the wonderful things you've done in your district grant project, because part of the reason we give district grants is to spread the awareness of Rotary in the community. So we're going to want copies of your PR materials if you did a media release or a press release. If you actually had press coverage, copies of those articles, and we'd love to get images of the project along the way so that we actually have some photographs that we could share. So be sure you promote your project, put it on your website, send out Facebook posts, put it on Instagram, send it to the newspapers. call the radio stations, so we really want to know what you've done, and we hope that you do a lot to really share the good your grant project did in the community.
Also, if your grant project involves labor and you need help, this is a great way to increase participation in Rotary. Might even lead your clubs to start a Rotary Community Corps, which would be non-Rotarians that just like to volunteer and do service. Yeah, that is a initiative that Rotary's been talking about for a couple of years now. It just gets people enjoy it. And don't be shy about asking your local media to do a story about this. I don't know if your newspaper is as bad as mine is, but my local newspaper now is basically a 2-page leaflet of local news with a whole bunch of national stuff that I could get off the USA Today. And they really do appreciate little scoops that we can provide for them, where they put local people in the newspaper and the local TV station and the local radio station. Do some interviews, have fun with this. Those things don't cost you anything, but it can be a big impact for your club. Let's take advantage of it. And we do have a resource in our district. Trent and Crystal West, they're our public image team. Trent's our public image chair. Check in with Trent and he can give you some ideas on how to publish what you're trying to do.
One of the things that we've done, since I share the same newspaper that Brian does, which doesn't really exist much in the local community anymore, and gives you news that you could have already read days ago in another outlet. But one of the things you can do, if you can't get the press to take your story, is write a letter to the editor, and usually they'll take those. And so you can write a letter to the editor talking about the good you did, or get the beneficiary to write one. That's even better, where they acknowledge how great Rotary was in helping them with this project. So just some ideas.
Don't keep Rotary a secret anymore, ever.
It's the best kept secret, right?
We don't need that. We
don't want that. Yeah.
Let's get the word out. We're a good.
Okay, so for the financial report, just like any financial report, you gotta, list your income and expenditures. You've probably done this on a spreadsheet. You should have done it on a spreadsheet. So this should be very easy. And you list all contributions of money, the cooperating organization, private club contributions, and all your expenditures. And the total income should equal the total expenditures. And I do have a question here that I'm going to ask Brian. So sometimes the project is actually overall more expensive than the Rotary. So is that the total income from Rotary equals total expenditures from Rotary? Because
no, this would be the total income. So if your club contributed $500, you got a $3,000 grant, got individual support, put all of that in there, and then the total expenditures is what the project costs. Because one of the things we're asked to provide now back to Rotary Foundation is what was the total cost of the project. They like to see if they make a contribution of $3,000, it generated a $6,000 deal. So they can say that the entire impact of that money is magnified. So let's keep track of everything we do.
Yeah, so I can think of a recent project where the school district project, the overall project, was more than Rotary contributed. And so in those final report budgets, it should show what the school district spent, the total expenditure, which is larger than the Rotary contribution.
You can also keep track of your hours and stuff spent in the Rotary website, rotary.org. Presidents have been asked for the last couple of years, and it's a lot of work. I know you might want to delegate it, but in your work that you do as a club, keeping track of your local hours spent is something that bubbles up to RI, and they like to tell in their press releases that the 1.3 million Rotarians, or 1.2 million, whatever it is these days, generated 250 million hours of work for the planet. Those are things that come up through the individual contributions of data that we provide.
When our club,
not in this,
Our club always did that on the Rotary International Foundation. So I have a question. Can that be built into here as a contributed private, can labor contribution valued at the national volunteer rate be included in this financial report?
I would rather it not be. I think they're
Okay.
still trying to find the financial component through this, but I think they'd like to see the human component through the other tracking tools that they're doing.
So really the bottom line here is actually the total income might be less than the total expenditures. So this last statement is not quite right. I mean, I think in most cases it would be true that the total income for the project matched the total expenditures. Or are we now saying as a part of total income, we should put whatever the beneficiary they spent financially?
I'd rather see it total, and then we know how much the grant was. So
Okay.
at least we got a record of where the money came from for the total project. It might even be if you use a partner organization, it comes out of their budget too.
Yeah. Okay. So not as clear cut as we thought, but in many cases they will be equivalent. All right. We're getting to the end here. The certifying signatures. So you should read this carefully and see what you're signing off on. But the club report form actually calls for the club president to sign off. And there is a statement in some of the guidelines that the officers are responsible. So if you contact people who actually did most of the project, they're not normally the ones that would sign off. It would be the club president, and the report form actually requests that. So get the signature of the club president. The primary contacts often are the people that are writing the report, from my experience, and they may not be the club president. So you will have a team that writes the report, but that president is signing off, showing that he took the responsibility of the stewardship and other issues.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay. And the report can be submitted to me by email, or it can also be mailed, and all that information is actually on the report form. So again, the club qualification, what this is all about, it is showing your commitment to sustainability of the benefits of the project, stewardship of monies and resources, and stewardship of the records of the financial transactions for the project. And I thought I would just show you that your application is actually reviewed by a team. It's usually a series of district governors and the district foundation chair and the grants chair. And then we might ask other individuals to participate. Again, I'm the grants chair from 2020 to 2023, and you should feel free if you have any questions while you're working on your application or preparing your report, just send me an email and I'll respond. I'm happy to help. I have experience with doing several district club grants, and I'd be happy to help you. And this is what Brian or someone, I don't know who prepared this originally, these are the things that you could do now again to get ready, is download that memorandum of understanding and get it signed, and also the addendum. There's an addendum to it. They both have to be signed off on. Meet with your club members to plan your project. Apply early before the deadline, but make the deadline of August 15th. And a thing that Brian added last year is you will always receive an email or a mail notification that we received your application. If you don't get that, that means we probably didn't receive your application. And it's your responsibility, if you don't get that receipt from us, to actually contact us and find out what the problem is. And we'll get through it.
Really emphasize it's your responsibility to make sure we got the grant. We Last thing we want to do is go through this whole process and then hear back from a club that said, hey, I submitted my application, how's my grant? And we don't have it. And this has happened, and it's horrible.
And
We
it
ended up
happened.
spending money out of, we had to spend money out of the district budget because of this, because we wanted to do the right thing. We don't have money budgeted for that. So it's your responsibility to make sure we have your application. Don't feel any kind of remorse about being a pest to make sure we got it. 'Cause
Yeah,
we
and
need that
there
help.
are legitimate things that can happen. I mean, sometimes your email system sends something to spam or to
Yep.
track, because it doesn't recognize
Or
it.
we get
So,
like 50 emails one day and yours happens to be the 31st and just stuff happens. So please.
so this is for your benefit, though. I mean, we want, if you go to the work to submit an application, we want to review it. So, and that's just summary information. And now I thought we actually are out of time. If there are questions in